The remains of Spanish dictator Francisco Franco will be exhumed from the Valley of the Fallen and reinterred with those of his widow in the family mausoleum near Madrid today. They're being moved because some people were concerned he was being glorified where his body was laid to rest. Spain's Supreme Court agreed to the exhumation at the end of last month. It's a very controversial move in Spain. General Franco's body has been in the huge state monuments near Madrid since his death back in 1975. Natalia Maystorovich Chulio is a research associate and lecturer at the University of Sydney and joins me now. Natalia, welcome. So first of all, for people unfamiliar with the history of Spain, tell us how Francisco Franco came to power and what characterised his decades as leader.
Sure. So Francisco Franco was one of the military generals that started the military coup against the democratically elected government of the Second Republic in Spain. And basically his reign followed a bloody civil war where approximately about 500,000 people died in that civil war, and it's believed possibly another 200,000 during the dictatorship.
And so he came to power on the back of a military coup which overthrew a democratically elected government.
That's correct.
And tell us a bit more detail about those decades of his power and how divided it left the country.
Yeah, so Spain was divided across nationalist and republican lines. Basically, the dictatorship had a lot of surveillance of Republicans. Republicans were in jail. Many were working in sort of labour camps, so forced labour camps and concentration camps. There were a lot of killings through military and other normal trials, so the courts were implicated in this. And so since 2000, there's been a large movement to recover those people that have been buried in mass graves, and that has led to a discussion about the past.
And so how many people died, like after the Civil War, you mentioned 500,000 people died in the Civil War, but during his period in power, how many political prisoners died?
Well, there is estimates up to 200,000.
Right.
So we think up to 700,000 people were killed during that whole period of 1936 to 75.
Yeah. And so he died in 75,
yes.
And there was a kind of pact of agreement between the major political groups after that so that the transition wasn't too tumultuous. Just talk us through what happened there.
Yeah, sure. So there was a pact of silence, which is commonly referred to, but it was the Amnesty Law of 1977, which was passed, which basically said we're going to put full stop on the past and we're not going to look back to what happened. And this meant that his survivors had to basically keep quiet about what had happened. It didn't allow for any sort of trials. It didn't allow for any truth and reconciliation. And so it left
there were these festering sores.
Yeah, well, they refer to them as these wounds that have never been able to heal.
And so when did that pact of silence get lifted and why?
Yeah, so in the year 2000, when Emilio Silva, a Spanish journalist, decides to look for his grandfather's remains, he locates them, and with the help of forensic specialists, he's able to uncover a mass grave with 13 men. And his grandfather is the first person to be identified using forensic techniques in Spain, and this basically leads to an explosion of memory. And people start asking questions about how do we find our relatives, and it leads to the formation of a number of NGOs in Spain which have been working since 2000 to recover victims across the country.
And so what's led to this exhumation then? What's the problem with where Francisco Franco is buried now?
Yeah, so the Valley of the Fallen is a mausoleum to the Civil War and to his victory. So it was intended to basically celebrate the victory against those Republicans.
And we should point out that the pictures you're seeing now are not that mausoleum. No. That mausoleum is a grand place.
It's built into.
I think these are the pictures.
That's where he's going.
Where he's going to be buried.
That's right.
Yeah. So what was the problem with that place where he was buried?
So that place has a few problems. Yeah. One of them is it was built on forced labour. So many people died building it. They had to excavate into a rock to build the mausoleum and the basilica within the rock, and also people were actually transferred there without their will. So in the cover of dark, the regime actually sought for councils to exhume mass graves and transfer them to the Valley of the Fallen. And so basically what the situation we have there is Franco is buried with his victims. So it would be similar to having Hitler buried with his victims from the Holocaust.
And so how this exhumation is going to happen today, like I think it's going to start about 6:30 Australian time tonight. How controversial is this move in Spain?
It's very controversial. It's because Spain is still divided along those two lines. You basically have people that are against it. So, for example, the Franco family has fought for about, say, 15 months to try and stop this exhumation. Also with the assistance of the church in Spain, which has worked with the Franco family to try and prevent the exhumation from going through, and various other authorities.
And when you say the church, the Catholic Church?
Yeah, the Catholic Church. Yeah. They've actually had to go all the way to the Vatican to say, can you please not create any obstacles so that we can do this, because we can't have a place that exalts a dictator in Spain in full view. And
so what's the potential for this... I hesitate to call it an event, this exhumation, for there to be protesters there, and talk us through, we've heard a lot about the far right in other countries in Europe, the rise of the far right. What's the situation with the far right in Spain? Yeah, so there is still a far right in Spain that's quite active. We're one of the only countries that has the fascist party still in existence. So the Falange is active in Spain. You've got a new movement and a new party called Vox, which is very pro-Franco, and they're trying to basically reinstate a lot of the ideas of Francoism, so against homosexuality, forced military service of young people, these sort of old ideas from the past that sort of were part of Francoism. And so what you have is this kind of rise, and you will see people protesting ever since in June last year when they announced they were going to do the exhumation. People had already gone to the Valley of the Fallen to protest. And these pictures we're seeing now, is that this is this grand mausoleum where he is buried, and where the exhumation is going to happen later today. Are you expecting there could well be clashes when this happens later today? There could be clashes, but I think the police in Spain will be in full force, so they will prevent, and I think that it's going to be far away from the actual event that's taking place. There will be a lot of security. They're not allowing mobile phones inside the mausoleum, so that even the family can't have their mobile phones, so they can't take photographs. So they're trying to control the image of what is going to take place as well, because of the symbolism behind Franco. And how do you think, or what do you think the worth of this is? Do you think this is, I know you're an academic and kind of impartial, but do you think this will be beneficial for the future of Spain, that this happens today? I think it's important that it happens. I think they have to be very careful about how they present it, because we neither can present it as, something where we bring offence to the family of Franco. Yes, he was a dictator, but we need to respect the family, but also we need to respect his victims and his survivors. And I think it's really important for democracy that we don't have a tomb that exalts the dictator, where he's buried with his victims and his supporters come and they hold up their arm like this in the fascist salute, and they sing songs that are quite offensive to a number of people who cannot retrieve their relatives from that site. So I think, it's very important that he's in and he's going to be buried with his wife. Yeah. It's not like we're going to disrespect Franco in any way. But is there a risk that this could inflame the situation? I don't think so. People argue that exhumations inflame the situation, and from my research, exhumations just heal wounds. They allow the community to come together, and this will be similar. The community will be able to come together. They can try and re-signify the site. It's going to be very difficult. But it needs to be a site that signifies both sides, because they're both buried there. And so the story needs to be told of what happened, and people need to know what happened in Spain. Still young people in Spain say to me, this happened here in Spain, because it's not taught at school effectively. So I think it's important. But the wounds still run very deep within some families over there. Okay, Natalia Maystorovich Chulio, thanks so much for coming in and giving us your knowledge and perspective on this. Thanks for having me.